Elevator ride. Back in the early 1960s, a student lived on the third floor, and her best friend lived on the sixth floor. They were inseparable and spent most of their days together. One day, tragically, she was found deceased from an accidental overdose. I wish I knew more details about that, but I don't. It's a tragedy either way. I started working at this university 15 years later. In the custodial department, I was a part of the crew that cleaned this dorm on campus. During the summers, when the students left, the buildings were closed and locked up. There were only 5 of us in the dorm doing the heavy, deep cleaning of the entire building. It had 6 floors and about 14 rooms on each floor. Over the years, there had been numerous reports of strange occurrences, such as vacuums unplugging, shadow figures darting, lights flickering, disembodied smells of perfume, windows opening on their own, people feeling someone standing behind them when they turned around, but no one was there. One person even claimed that her hair was constantly being touched. In the stairwells, people would feel cold air moving and feelings of someone watching them. Doors would slam shut on empty, dark floors. On this particular day, we were doing our regular jobs. As the day came to an end, we all headed to the basement to prepare to leave for the day. Our boss informed us that we had left windows open on the 6th floor, so we went to the elevator to head to the 1st floor so that the other 3 could go home. It was payday, and they didn't want to wait for us. Once they had left, we were the only 2 people in the building. I pressed the 6th floor button and started the elevator, cracking jokes about the ghostly presence. I was certain that I had closed those windows up there. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor. The doors opened as if Susan, the ghost we all called her, had joined us. A chilling aura enveloped the elevator, transforming it into a cold and oppressive space. Time seemed to crawl as the elevator slowly moved up, feeling like an eternity. Finally, we reached the 6th floor. My coworker and I stood there, paralyzed with terror, our eyes wide and shaking. When the doors opened, we froze, breathless and terrified, before sprinting out of the elevator. We sprinted the entire time we shut the windows. Returning to the elevator, we found the doors still open, as if someone held them open, waiting for us. We had no choice but to board the elevator once again as we locked up the stairwells on weekends. Back then, the doors seemed to take an eternity to close. When they finally did, a wailing, moaning, and unsettling sound reverberated around us, emanating from the elevator shaft. It seemed to have come from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. It was an indescribable sound, a fusion of anger and pain. I had never heard anything like it before or since. To this day, it haunts my dreams. I pressed the 1st floor button, but the elevator stopped on the 3rd floor once more. What felt like an eternity passed before the doors finally opened, and it seemed like several hours before they shut again and descended back to the 1st floor. When the elevator finally reached the 1st floor, my coworker nearly ran me over, barely waiting for the doors to open. We dashed out. We stood there, transfixed, watching the doors remain open for what felt like an hour before they finally shut, and the elevator floor indicator light flicked to 2 and then to 3 and didn't move again. Throughout this terrifying ordeal, the chilling wailing, screaming, moaning sound persisted, even when the elevator was stopped. And still as the empty elevator made its last stop on the 3rd floor. We fled the building, seeking freedom. When made it to our respective cars, I looked up to the 3rd floor and I swear to this day that I caught a glimpse of someone standing in the window. Elevators terrify me to this day. In the years after this terrifying ordeal, the elevator never made that sound again. That was the last time the 2 of us joked about the ghost named Susan.
This story takes place when I was 11, in the mountains of New Mexico. I was born in Taos in 1950. My father was a logger, so we moved around a lot, and I grew up in logging camps. Growing up, We were always playing in and around the mountains. We had a big yellow dog named Roscoe. That dog was always with my brother. Everywhere he went, Roscoe followed. My brother was about 9 and would often lose track of time when he was out playing. Mama often sent me out before it got dark to go find him. On this particular late afternoon, it was no different. My 5-year-old niece wanted to come help. I took her little hand and started off into the woods. On the trail, my brother always took to his little fort, where his friends and he played. I kept seeing what I thought was Roscoe following behind us and off to the side in the bushes. Looking back on it, I don't remember hearing any leaves crunching or branches breaking like you would hear with a big dog romping through the forest. I had been calling my brother's name, so I figured my brother and Roscoe were close by. We kept going. Continuing up the trail, we came upon this tree. It had low-hanging limbs. So just for context, I was not very tall as I was only 11 at the time. I could climb up on some of the big limbs because of how low some of the limbs were. Something about it told me to stop. I did. I just stood there staring at this tree until my eyes landed on one of the lower limbs. I saw what I thought was Roscoe, until I saw the tail twitching, like a cat's tail. I then knew that that was not Roscoe, and that it wasn't Roscoe that had been following us that whole time. My first thought was, my niece has flip-flops on. We will not outrun this thing. I froze, and we stood there staring at each other for what felt like forever. But then we started to hear Roscoe, my brother, and some of his friends. They were working their way up a small embankment. The closer they got, the safer I began to feel. They were unaware that I was in a staring match with a man-eater. When they finally came up over the embankment, in what seemed like slow motion, the big cat jumped off the limb it was crouching on and ran off. My brother and his friend said their goodbyes, and they went off home. My brother stopped beside me and asked, "What are you staring at?" I said, "We need to hurry, because I think I saw a mountain lion in that tree." He grabbed our niece's other hand, and we took off. It was evening when we got home. You need to understand that we lived in a small log cabin in a logging camp way up in the mountains, with 8 other families in their respective cabins spread out. So we were very isolated. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. We were safe. We were home getting ready to eat dinner. It was an isolated incident. We settled in for supper. About an hour later, I had to use the bathroom, which was outside. My older sister, my brother, and I went to the outhouse. When we came back in, I sat down at the table alone to finish up my homework. The cabin was a small one, so my parents weren't too far away in the living room. I had been there for about 20 minutes. I was working on a math problem that I could not figure out. I looked up from the book in frustration and met a pair of yellow eyes staring at me through the screen door. I froze with fear for a second time that day. I remember the lamp's flame flickering in those eyes. I will never forget that. Something was telling me that it was the same mountain lion from earlier. It had followed us back to our cabin. I don't know how I managed to stay so calm both times, but all I did was stay very still and say, "Daddy, I think there's a mountain lion on our porch." He jumped up, grabbed his rifle, and ran out the door but never found a mountain lion. We left that area soon after. The story is my mother's story from when she was a little girl. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps me to keep making content for you all to enjoy. Do good. Be good.